Tyson. I'm a garden manager here at Helmsley Walled Garden. Beautiful sort of 5-acre garden in Helmsley, and set up as a tourist attraction. We're a daycare centre, retail outlet, volunteer centre, education unit.
Wow, lots of things.
Lots of things going on.
How long have you been here, Mark?
Being a gardener, we measure it in seasons. So
Okay,
I've only been
that's
here like
nice.
15, 16 months, it's 2 years. So I've had 2 gardening seasons here in the Walled Garden. But I've known about the place for 15 years.
Yeah. So where were you before that then?
I was a head gardener at a private garden near Therapeutic.
Oh, okay.
So I was there for 9 years, looking after, well, we built a 5-acre walled garden there. So
Oh, really?
walled garden seemed to be sort of coming 5 acres, yeah.
So that's what this is here.
5 acres.
Can you just give us a sort of a, excuse the pun, but a potted history of the walled garden? And it was a rescue, wasn't it, really?
It was. I mean, in keeping with all walled gardens, the Victorian period was its high point, and then after the First World War it started to go into decline. It had a short time as a market garden, and then in the mid-90s, a lady called Alison Ticehurst, a local district nurse, discovered the site. It was run down, but she thought and knew that horticulture can be used for therapeutic reasons to help restore people back to well-being, general well-being for people. And she set about trying to turn the place into something that could achieve that. And that's where we are now, you know. We use tourism as a big help for us, plant sales, gardening courses.
So it's a dual restoration. It's a restoration, obviously, of the gardens, because it was in a very forlorn state,
Yeah.
but also she had it in her vision that it was going to be a restoration of people too.
Yes, yeah.
So first of all, tell us about the restoration of the garden, just a little bit about the state it was in, and then just sort of bring us up to date as the wonderful place that it is now.
I mean, different to some of the other, I would say the National Trust, the more classic gardens, because it was a market garden at one point, you know, it would have been a cleared site. So we don't have a heritage collection of one plant or another plant, because it would have been cleared to be the market garden. So when we came here, it would have been full of brambles, briars, willow herb, and I suppose it's like people say, how do you eat an elephant? Well, the early guys would have done a small bit at a time, small bit at a time. And then you reach a tipping point. And I think for me, the tipping point for the garden was the restoration of the greenhouses. Because the restoration of the greenhouses allowed not only horticultural use to be able to grow things, but it more importantly allowed for the cafe, a professional place for people to come and enjoy themselves. We've got facilities for training people in the greenhouses. We've got a community room that we can rent off for people to come in and use those facilities as well. So that heritage point of it was the tipping point for us, really.
And when did that come about then?
That would be 6, 7, 8 years ago, something
Right.
like that. Not 6, 7, 8 years, because it was like a 2-3 year project.
Right. So that's the gardens with help from the lottery, I understand.
Yes, yeah, Heritage Lottery Fund.
A massive amount of money, and you've now got restored these beautiful greenhouses. So tell me more about the restoration of people then, and how that works in terms of people coming here.
I think the important thing is that we give people time, and that's as much as anything. It's the fact that people can find a secure place, and it's strange how you have this analogy of it's a walled garden and people do feel secure when they come into the garden. I mean, it's maybe one good example might be that we've had an individual with us who was referred to us by the mental health team, who was having problems of isolation. He was having difficulties with his family, and we spent some time with him. We still continue to spend some time with him, but it would have taken us 4 to 5 weeks before he would come and join everybody for a cup of tea. And it's only a small step, but here's a guy now that comes to us regularly, comes on a weekly basis. He's joining in fully with everybody. We're not medical clinicians, we're nothing like that. We just provide space for people to be able to heal themselves. And people do find an analogy between touching the soil, growing, and seeing things develop, and they look at themselves.
So these are often people who might have had anything whatsoever to do with gardening in their lives previously. So do you find with, I mean, obviously you've had lots of people coming through, that they stick with gardening, or it's part of the healing process and they might go off and leave it, but that...
I think the gardening sticks with them. I think it's something that it not only gets under your fingernails, but it does get into the skin as well. No, I think they do stick with the gardening for that. I mean, we have individuals, I mean, that was individual that was referred to us, but we have other individuals who will come into the garden because they probably come to terms with the bereavement. You know, we've had individuals that will come for us only maybe for 5 weeks, 5-6 weeks, something like that. They're just going through that difficult period of time where they've lost a partner that they've probably been with for 20, 30 years. And I think we just help give them, going back to this thing about time again, just a bit of time, and non-judgmental, with nobody's saying you've got to pull yourself together and get over it or anything like that. It's just, we'll give them space, give them time to talk if they want to talk. You know, sometimes they will talk more generally to everybody, sometimes they'll just find another individual within the site that they want to talk to and talk to that individual.
So in terms,
it just helps them through that process.
In terms of the volunteers that you have, you have a whole mix of people. Some people are wanting horticultural experience because of wanting to go on to college or whatever. Some people have got some hours to fill. Some people, like you've just been talking about, it's a real mix.
Yeah, we've got, I think we recently done an audit of our active volunteers, and we're at about 50, 55 volunteers, something like that, that have had an involvement this year for different periods of time. So, I mean, and that extends right away from the guys who are our trustees, you know, looking after the site, and the people we have training horticultural therapists who will come on and help us in that side. We have individuals who just turn up on a morning and say, what we're going to do today then, and they go off and work in the garden somewhere. And you know, we've got people in the 60s and 70s who say, oh, I'm going to do some digging. And think, oh, wonderful, you know, but there are other guys who will just say, there are other people who will have one area of the garden, they like to just come and work in one particular area of the garden and look after the one particular area of the garden. We have ladies that will come and sort the teas out, the good old Yorkshire tea. They'll do the Yorkshire tea for coach trips and the visits that we have to the gardens. We have other individuals that come and volunteer and run the shop for us.
So you have such a wide range of jobs here that you can find a role for virtually anybody who's got some time and wants to be involved.
I've never known us turn anybody away because they wouldn't fit in. Never known that we wouldn't. And I honestly cannot think of a situation where we could not find something for somebody to do. And it's not like the army, you know, you're not signing up to be with us for the next 15 years. If you're with us for 3 weeks, fine. You know, if after that time, you know, you want to move on and go do some other things, that's fine.
But I bet you've had some who stayed a long time, haven't you?
We have. We've got people here right from the beginning. You know, so there are still people here from 15 years ago. Yeah.
Gosh, I bet what a sense of, you know, accomplishment they feel, you know, when they've watched it.
Yes. There's been this, if you like, there's a culture we try to grow within the garden, which is that, for me now, I'm like the third generation of manager from when Alison took it on. But the important thing for us is that we don't do anything that impacts on the people that are going to follow us. In the same way, the ones that people have done beforehand, all the work and the contributions, we build on that. And that informs what we want to be doing. And we have to make sure that it's that culture that we protect, so that I'll give an example, in 10 years' time, and I'm not here, I probably will be here in 10 years' time, if the gardeners and the volunteers that are here then decide that our wonderful main border that we've got, actually what we need in there is a national collection of green runner beans, that's fine by me. That's not a problem. Yeah. The issue is, not the issue, the thing to maintain is the process of gardening. As long as we always have a place where people can come and work, a place where people can come and do gardening, that's best. That's the goal, if you like. The processes are the goals for me, not necessarily the final outcome.
Right.
The final outcome can be a wonderful flower border, it could be a veg plot, it could be fruit garden, it doesn't matter. And if the next generation take things out and put something different in, that's fine. just keep that process of how gardening can help people to have a better life. We use this thing called well-being, you know, that people have a sense of well-being through the process of gardening.
And that's, you know, I'm here today to talk about sustainability, and that's key to it, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's different from what you might otherwise think about sustainability in the sense of, you know, of a garden, and, you know, you, as you're saying, you have a particular collection and you build that up and you become renowned for that. That's not for you.
No.
Interesting.
No. I mean, it's for the people who were there at the time.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, there's one guy at present looks after our rose garden that we've got, and he's been doing that for 3-4 years. And we will do nothing, no matter what the design of the garden. You know, if there was a major big plan, there isn't a big plan, but if there was a big plan for the garden, it would be to do nothing until this gentleman decides that that's what he wants to stop doing there, or is unable to do any more in that particular area.
So it's nothing about your personal ambition, Mike, but what you want to make this place. That's lovely. That's lovely. You can see why people want to stay, because they will have a real ownership over the garden.
I hope so. You know,
yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. You know, when the minute you put 55 people together at different times and different days, you have fallouts, you have upsets, you have people will have disagreements about how something should be done, how it shouldn't be done. But there's more that binds us together than ever separates us.
Okay, well, that's wonderful, and that's put us in the context of how the garden runs. Tell us a little bit about things we were having a chat about in the office, about the sustainability of some of the work that you're doing here.
I mean, one project is maybe a good start for it, is that we've been asked to build a garden for York Minster, which is a physics garden or a medieval garden for them down there. Now, we've always looked at the composts that we use within the garden, or any gardener will look at composts that you're using within the gardening world. And the move is to try to get away from peat and the use of peat in the garden. And that's mainly because people don't like the concept of actually destroying one landscape to help other people to grow things. But I know the Royal Horticultural Society has done it, and a whole range of the commercial compost growers have all tried to come up with alternatives, coir, forest-based materials, and it's proven difficult to find something that's as good as peat. As general, peat, you know, the peat-based ones are very good all round. Anyway, but there are now some commercial products that are out there. We've just picked one up. We're now growing plants for the Minster project, and we're doing a trial. We have a compost that we use that has some peat in it, and we're now trying a compost that has no peat in it, and we'll see over the next 6 to 9 months how well the plants grow in both. You know, they don't have to grow the same. What we have to do is find out the different methods of managing them, and often the difficulty becomes in how you do the watering, because the peat-based compost will maintain a moisture that is beneficial to the plants, whereas some of the non-peat-based composts often need a different watering regime. Okay. So that's what we're playing with at present, and we'll try and find a method.
And are you making the general public, the people who visit the garden, aware of this experiment, and that you're working on this, and those results will be made?
Yeah, we will do. I mean, we haven't yet, but we will do. I mean, these were seeds that have been sown in June, July. We're now pricking them out to the point where they're going to grow during the winter months, and then we will know by sort of March, April time next year how well.
And I guess it might inform the techniques that you have here as well in terms of your usage of it as well.
I think so. I mean, the other thing that we're trying to promote now is horticulture and gardening and running the gardening course. And if you like, that's an example of what we're trying to do within the course. Is we're saying to people that if you want to grow something, you know, there isn't one hard, fast rule. You know, you don't just do it that way and that's the way it will always work for you. What we're trying to introduce to people is, here is a substrate, that's another word for compost, and this substrate has got, some has peat in it, and you get this sort of result, some don't have peat in it, you get this result, some will have a coir in it, some will have a forest-based product, some will have the products from the waste that the local authorities produce, and each and every one of them will give you a different result, and each and every different one of them will have pluses and minuses as to how you've got to manage. That's also the gardening course tries to show people that here are the benefits and, if you like, the consequences of using a particular method, and you guys go away and decide which is the best for you, you know. And you could do the same thing with use of chemicals in the garden. You know, people say, oh, I'm organic because I don't use chemicals. But there are actually some organic chemicals, the Derris and the Peat-free, which are actually indiscriminate. They will kill anything they touch.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Whereas there are some inorganic chemicals that actually are not indiscriminate.
Yeah.
So we try to show to people, you know, where they are. I mean, if it was in the garden, here, it's probably a good example. I mean, we try in the garden, we grow a whole range of produce. It goes into the calf, and we sell some on the side as well. We do not use any chemicals on any of our produce that people are going to eat. Full stop. Just don't do anything of that at all. We don't think that's the way we want to go. But we have a lot of paths, and sometimes the way to clear a path is to use a chemical, glyphosate. Now that would not make us organic in the terms of some of the associations that give you a qualification or a standard assessment of whether you are or you are not organic. But we think in that we found a balance. We think we found a balance that keeps the paths clear, but it doesn't impact on any of the produce that people are eating or that we're selling for people to eat. And the gardening course tries to do that. The gardening course just tries to show people that, you know, you don't necessarily have to be a disciple and fight your corner, and well, you can do if you want to. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to do that, you can do. And at the same time, you know, there are lots of other different alternatives than just going to the shelf, pulling off a chemical and squirting the gun at something.
Just tell us about this gardening course. It's just started, isn't it?
It's just started last week.
Yeah. And did you get a good number of people?
Yeah, we've got 5 people on it. Well, 5 doesn't sound a lot. 5's good to get us started on. There's another lady coming this next week. Again, we've tried to change it because there's always been this thing that, you know, you start a course in September and you run and that's it. We're actually running this bit like a carousel, so that if you wanted to, come and join in March, and then just run it through to March the following year, because the course is a 1 year in the garden. It will give people an understanding of the fundamentals of gardening and how you can do it, and you can step on and step off when you want.
Right, and the details are on the website.
Details are on the website.
We'll put a link through to that. So that's the gardening year in the walled garden, learning all sorts of different aspects.
Stuff, fundamentals of gardening.
Led by you?
Yes, myself is presenting it. Yeah.
Right, and what's the time demands of it? How many hours a week is it?
It's 2 hours a week.
Oh.
Nothing. 2 hours a week.
Only 5 people do. We need to promote
I know. I think more will come. I think.
Yeah, it's early days.
I used to do some teaching for Ascot Bryan, and that was the case. Once you get the momentum going, and I think we've made the decision that we're going to run this. You know, even on those numbers, it will take time, but it will embed itself, and it will become something that people want to do.
Is it the first time the Walled Garden's done a course like this?
No, I think they have done courses in the past. I think we're quite fortunate, and this is why you see different things move on, don't they? I mean, we currently have, there's myself and there's another lady who's a qualified adult educator as well. So there's 2 of us now, so that's suddenly a bit, you know, so we're registered with the Institute for Learning, you know, so we're not what's called an accredited site yet, but we're accredited trainers.
Okay.
And in time we will hopefully try and move to a point where we're an accredited site and can do qualifications. I mean, that's the purpose of.
Do you think there's a demand for that around here?
I don't think there's necessarily that people don't always associate the need for learning with the need to get a certificate. In fact, I think as you get older, just as they get older, people don't want to do that level of training and putting themselves under exams and courses and things like that. I have given them some homework this last week.
Oh, have you?
But it's not a lot. They've only got to go and dig a hole in the garden and see what happens.
Well, it sounds absolutely great.
So it's not too bad.
Now, with sort of, you know, everyone's worried about the economy. It's looking like it's going downhill fast. I mean, do you think that will change the role? I'm thinking about people sort of thinking more about growing their own, becoming more self-sufficient. Could you see that, you know, I'm throwing this at you, but do you see the role of the walled garden perhaps changing in times when you know, people are having to think much more about being self-sufficient. Do you think that will ever have an impact on you?
I mean, within the garden, the one thing that we already have, if you like, there's a small area of the garden, I think there's about 20 beds in there, and we rent them off to the community. So those are like a small allotment.
Right.
You know, they're maybe 6-7 metres by 1.5 metres, something like that. But it's a good starting point for anybody that wants to grow. And I have to say that for the visitors, the bit of work we've done with the visitors that come to the garden, how people grow things is as interesting to them as seeing a big full border full of flowers. In fact, those two things, the big full border of flowers and how people grow plants, is the ones of most interest that people see. And they're fascinated to see how different people find different methods of protecting their plants.
Yeah.
We might see that later on. There's some
Yeah.
things later on that we'll have a look and see how people are protecting things. So there's.
Do you think that area might grow, that you might offer more of? I mean, obviously, you know,
Well, I think the amount of land we've got, I think we're doing as much as we can on that. But there are nationally whole different sorts of schemes, aren't there now? There's I just can't remember the name of the scheme whereby people are finding pieces of land in their towns, their villages, and taking them on. You know,
yes.
I know Richmond's doing it quite strongly now. In Richmond, they're doing it there, where people are just taking over a piece of land and.
Or if somebody's got a surplus, a huge garden, they can't cope.
I've often thought that would be a place whereby some work could be done, I think, in the like housing association arena, whereby you have lots of houses with lots of people who are elderly. They can't maintain that piece of land that they've got. So there is something, I think, whereby if we could manage that piece of land, you get the two benefits. People would find some place where they could grow their vegetables for themselves, and isolated people, elderly people, would actually find other people coming onto their gardens and into their sites that they could make a cup of tea for and they could have a time to. And you end up with those two benefits. You know, you're using the land, you've got people doing it for themselves in terms of producing some vegetables to grow, and you're also helping some of the elderly people to have contact with other people
on a small scale.
Exactly, yeah. So I think the scope for them, we might find time to do something like that later on. Well, that's the sort of thing. I think that's the sort of thing that, for us, the garden would excite us. I think that's the sort of thing that we could certainly get involved with other people about doing that. I mean, that is, if you like, taking the activities that we do here off-site, and we've just got to be a bit careful about that. But I certainly think some project along those sorts of lines would be beneficial for everybody. I mean, it also reduces some of the council costs, because a lot of the places that the elderly people live in is just turned to grass, and they're paying somebody to come and cut the grass.
Exactly. Just out of interest, are there allotments in Helmsley?
I'm not sure. There's an allotment that's used by the children from the school, just past Woollands and Howards. And that's a central feature there, and forms a good garden for in bloom, for Helmsley in bloom. I'm not sure. There's a couple of private pieces of land, I think, where people do that, but I'm not sure if there is.
Right. Okay, well, thank you very much. That's great. Should we go out into the garden? It's going to be a bit windy, so let's get some noise on the camera. We'll go and have a look.
Okay. We're now in what's known as the Millennium Garden. It was Lindsay, one of the gardeners here. It was one of their projects for a training course that she did. And there's about 20 raised beds, and these are all rented out to the community. And they come and grow their own vegetables, and there's a scurry of activity on a Sunday morning about 9:30, 10 o'clock, as somebody's wife has said to them, I need vegetables for the Sunday lunch. So there's a lot of running down here to come and gather things up, and then off they go again. But this is one of the attractions in the gardens, that the visitors come and are quite fascinated to see how people grow their vegetables.
Well, you can see why.
They'll do it differently.
Yeah, and they're really well cared for.
They are. Yeah, they'll spend a lot of time.
I suppose there's quite a lot sort of competition between them as they look over their shoulders and see what they're.
Well, we've just had our produce show in September. The produce show in September, but build it as an alternative produce show so that it's non-competitive. It's probably more closely aligned to a harvest festival. We were asking the guys to come and bring the vegetables that they'd grown, or the flowers they'd grown, and to have pride in that. And no, the carrots didn't have to be clean and free of carrot root fly.
It's 6 foot long.
6 foot long. They just had to be what they'd grown at the time and what people had pleasure with, you know.
So that's the alternative aspect of it. It's non-competitive.
Non-competitive, absolutely non-competitive.
Brilliant.
Okay, we're on our apiary site. Our first apiary site here at Helmsley Walled Garden. These are some calm buckfast bees that Sian, one of our volunteers, looks after. There's 3 of us on site. I've got hives dotted around the local area. So we're all getting excited about trying to get honey. But the management of bees is, I wouldn't say it's difficult, it's challenging. Let's say it's challenging. And I think for us it's our second year looking after bees. First year doing a bit of training, first full year with the bees. We've now managed to get about 5 or 6 hives that we've got between the 3 of us. And with a bit of luck, next year we should have plenty of honey. But the one learning point we've had this year has been that the bees don't read the same books as beekeepers. So there's been a lot of synthesis about taking different ideas from different people. People often talk about if you put 3 gardeners in a... So if you put 1 gardener in a garden, you'll end up with 3 opinions. Well, I've found now if you put 3 beekeepers in a room, you'll end up with 9 opinions of how to... And none of them are wrong. None of them are wrong on how it should work. So with a bit of luck, we're going to have some bees. Well, they're just bringing in some pollen now. Looking at it, they've got some... Can you see the sacs? I don't know if you can get them close enough. Well, they're just some nice... yellow pollen on them, some late pollen. It might be, hopefully, from the garden. If it's not from the garden, I'm not sure that the ivy's out just yet. But
will they travel far? I mean,
3 miles.
Oh, right.
Up to 3 miles.
Right.
I mean, they'll also go to the shortest place they can get to, provided it's what they want. You know, if it's the thing they're looking for at the time, that's what they'll go for.
So, in a couple of years, Mike, how do you sort of see this developing? You obviously aim to have walled garden honey there on the shelves in the shop.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how many hives would you hope to have, do you think?
Well, managing the hives, I mean, if I've got 3 hives and I can keep 3 hives going, that's likely to produce somewhere close to 90 pounds of honey.
Wow, really?
They'll produce about 30 pounds. People talk about 50 pounds per hive, but I think 30 is a reasonable expectation to take off. So
right.
If I've got 3 hives, Sian's got 3 hives, and Norman's got 3 hives, we're close to £100 of honey that we'll get.
Brilliant.
More.
So what about sort of individuals watching this at home? You've got a decent sized garden. I presume you need a decent sized garden, or
yes.
what?
Yeah.
So could they come here and get some advice from you?
I mean, the advice we would give anybody who wants to do beekeeping is pick up one of the beekeeping courses or go to a beekeeping group. Rydale's got a strong group, Rydale Beekeepers. I'm sure we'll put the website on our website, sort of thing. But Rydale Beekeepers, that's where Sian and Norman have done their course. If you're a bit further afield, Harrogate's got a strong one. That's the one I belong to, the Harrogate Beekeepers there. And it's good. You get a bit of mentoring. We've had mentoring through what with the trials and tribulations that we've had of beekeeping. And you do get trials and tribulations, you know.
But at the end of the day, you'd say it's worth it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, you just see, we're looking at the bees come in and out.
Yeah.
And you'll find them in the garden, you know. I had a hive at home in my garden, and they've lovely just see them. They're out there collecting all the time, busy away.
So you also recycle tools. So should we go and have a look at those?
Yep, we've got tools. We've got some tools that are recycled. There's a guy that looks after this, a guy called Brian. He will go off to the different farm auctions and house auctions. He'll find old garden tools, restore them, bring them in here, and we act as a point of sale.
Fantastic. And he does this as a volunteer?
No, he does this as a living. It's a living for him.
They're beautiful, aren't they?
But the good thing is, you can you don't get a standard size. So you've got a nice little border fork here, which is just a bit longer shafted. Probably about the size that I would need a border fork for.
You got your eye on that one, haven't you?
But then you can get a smaller one.
Yep.
For something a bit smaller than me. So I've seen them smaller than that as well. We've got
So what would the age of some of these be then? What have you got some?
Well, I think some are not massively old. I mean, this is probably 60s, 70s. You can often tell by the end of the shaft because we've got wooden shafts. This will be a lot older. This is a D shaft on it, so this really is a. Hold on, this might be going back just turn of the century, something like that.
But
For it to be D-shafted like that, because it's all cut in one piece.
Oh,
It's,
I see. Yes, it's all one.
It's all one piece that somebody's cut it out. It might even be a bit of work that somebody's done, like a school project or something. But that's all one piece is out. So that's
What would the price of that be? Because it's
£20
£20.
for a potato fork.
Fantastic.
Not bad.
They're beautiful, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, they're
Yeah,
just something
yeah,
you could feel very proud of owning something like that.
And something like this. That's probably a 60s. I remember my mother using that in her garden. Something like that.
Did you find them difficult to get hold of, or are they? I imagine that
I think
they don't turn up very much.
no. I think he is able to clear them out from the local auctions.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah, yeah, fantastic.
it's got to be better than going to landfill, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's got to be better than landfill.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, and compared to going into your sort of B&Q place as well,
Yeah,
these
yeah.
have got loads of carry.
I mean, there's one there that I think that's been used. That should be about that thick. So that's actually been hoed and hoed and hoed and hoed. That's probably come off a farm where people have been spending days going down between sugar beet, hoeing off down there. Sheffield. Comes from a company from Sheffield. So
Fantastic.
it cleans them up, oils them. If they need securing, resecure them.
So if you're starting a garden for the first time, you not only can get loads of advice and inspiration here, you can get your tools as well.
You get your tools as well.
Mike, thank you ever so much.
You're
It's been
welcome.
really great.
Good.